everybody. Thanks for joining us on our late update on Hurricane Delta. I'm meteorologist Leslie Hudson. I'm the chief of the weather department here, and I want to thank you guys for stopping in and catching this late update. I don't know how many people will join us, but we're going to go ahead and do this anyways. We were waiting for the debate to get done because we weren't sure how many people were going to watch. So now that that's over, okay, so Matt says my audio is off, so he's going to try and fix it. Raspy, he's telling me, so he's going to fix it for us. So stand by. He's going to try and fix that, and while he's doing that, we'll kind of talk here for a second. So as you guys gone through all kinds of wild fluctuations over the last couple of days, and Matt's telling me it's better. Let me know, you guys, if you can hear me okay, and hopefully you can, and we'll go ahead and get going, and let me know in these chats. I've got them all open. I've got YouTube open at the moment, but I can check on all the other ones as well, Facebook and Twitter, and we'll see if everything's going okay. So as I started to say is, as you know, there has been several changes to Delta's intensity over the last couple of days. At one point, we were talking about winds at 145 miles an hour just yesterday, and now we're looking at winds around 90 miles an hour. And I talked about this over these last 2 days. When we have these small compact hurricanes, the fluctuations can vary wildly because it doesn't take as long as these smaller hurricanes to ramp up or to ramp down. So we've seen that for sure in play out in spades over the last couple of days. So we'll see how that all plays out in these next 24 to 30 hours, where Delta is going to be over the central Gulf of Mexico and have some opportunity to develop a little more. But what it did today is make landfall along the tip of the Yucatan Peninsula. And we have some video out of Cancun, and this was from this morning when it made landfall between Cancun and Cozumel. You can see the flooded streets here. The storm surge came in. Winds estimated over 100 miles an hour with gusts closer to 115. Luckily, most of the area there between Cancun and Cozumel was spared a lot of significant damage, widespread significant damage, I should say. There is significant damage there, but at least in terms of the worst case scenario, we did not see that happen. It did, however, disrupt the structure of Delta, and Delta, of course, reemerged into the Gulf a weaker hurricane. So that's all good news, but we are anticipating Delta to get stronger as we head into tonight and into tomorrow as well, before we see the landfall on Friday. So let me show you the app real quick. And we've been trying to show this to you guys a lot because, again, this is one of the best ways you can track Delta or any tropical cyclone with our wind layer. And you can see the compactness of Delta. As I mentioned, it has gotten a little larger in size, but not in strength of the two scenarios. At least at this point, we'll take a larger in circumference storm than we would say a more powerful storm. But notice the reds there. I talked about this yesterday, too, that we would see those reds start to get a little bit more like a donut shape, trying to get all around all the quadrants of the hurricane. So this definitely indicates to me a better, a more mature hurricane, I should say. So it's been a hurricane for a couple of days now, and we're starting to see some of that develop here on the radar. And you can see that with the wind layer too, that the winds are tightly compact around that center. And once it starts to feed off of that warm Gulf of Mexico water, we'll start to see some intensification. So you have to remember, when it goes over land, it loses its feeding source, just like anyone else, like humans or animals or any other live being. If you don't have food or water, you're gonna show that in terms of lack of energy. So that energy source was taken away from Delta for several hours today, but now that it's back over in its feeding environment, it will likely restructure a bit and get a little bit stronger. And it's also going to start to possibly get larger, even larger in size than we're seeing here. I talked about that too, because I do think that it's going to expand, and that could mean problems for more parts of the northern Gulf Coast than we would like to see. So several states could be involved, as opposed to just potentially Louisiana, where we think landfall is going to happen. So there's the bigger, broader perspective. It's about 500 miles or so, give or take, south of Cameron, Louisiana. So let me switch over, Matt, to WSI. We'll take a look at the live radars. Of course, I'm not expecting anything on the radars across the southeast or even over into Texas. Just wanted to show you real quick that we've got our 5 radars up and scanning, looking for activity. By tomorrow night at this time when we do an update, we'll see a lot more going on, because it's going to, of course, be a lot more active once the cyclone gets closer to the U.S. and gets picked up by the ground radar in the United States. So what we anticipate, let me see here, my map is not advancing. One second. Let's see if I can get past it here. Let me reload that. So, okay, there it goes. So what we're anticipating, of course, is the rains to start to pick up sometime late tomorrow night and into Friday. And then, of course, the winds will pick up as well. I've got the current wind speeds on here, and I just wanted to show you, just so if you had an idea, if you were curious, if you live anywhere from Texas over to the Florida Panhandle and you're curious about what the winds are doing right now, this is the live wind speeds in this area. I've got a couple of buoys plotted there south of Louisiana. We'll keep those up as long as we can get data from them tomorrow and Friday. And as you can see in the neighborhood, 5-10 miles an hour is certainly not a big deal. A little bit higher with those buoys, also not unusual offshore. But I suspect by tomorrow night we're going to see that ramp up, of course, and then especially into Friday when we get into our closest point of interaction with the U.S. as we head into Friday afternoon, which looks to be the current thinking of landfall. You may have recalled yesterday I was talking about landfall would be somewhere around maybe 11 or midnight on Friday night into early Saturday morning. Well, the Hurricane Center kind of bumped that estimated landfall to around the window of maybe 1 p.m. on Friday to around 5 p.m. That's going to be really honed in as we get into these next 24 hours or so, and we get a little bit better on the timing. But new tonight, of course, are the hurricane warnings that have been issued for parts of Louisiana, and we also have storm surge warnings as well. So I'll show you that in a second. But again, the infrared imagery, a great tool to show the presentation and the composition of these hurricanes. And notice, some of this looking a little less ragged, of course, than what we saw last night. Last night at this time, we were in the neighborhood of about 100 to 110 mile per hour winds. So again, a little less structure here because it's obviously been disrupted once it went over the Yucatan Peninsula. But don't let that fool you, because it's going to be sitting in the central Gulf here for about 2 days. So we do expect that banding feature to pick back up. We still have some good outflow here. You can see it here. We've got a nice effect right here. And then on the north side of the cyclone, we've got some outflow coming up here. So definitely, structurally, this looks like a nice mature hurricane, but fortunately for us, it's not as powerful as it was just 2 days ago, and that's all good news. So again, winds sustained at 90 miles an hour, the pressure 972. The path now still keeps it right on that path towards Louisiana, towards Cameron, perhaps, again, Lake Charles, areas that have already dealt with several hurricanes this year. We know that Sally and Hurricane Laura were, huge impacts across the Gulf Coast, and unfortunately it looks like Delta is going to be a direct player as well. The only upshot to this is the Hurricane Center has bumped down its intensity forecast with Delta, and I'll tell you why that is coming up in a second. But I want to show you how fast Delta will be moving, which again, in terms of flooding risk, will greatly get lesser and lesser as we head into the weekend, which I was initially concerned about. I'm still concerned about flooding, but in terms of parts of the southern Mississippi Valley, a lot of folks have been asking, hey, what's going to happen in Tennessee? What's happening in Kentucky? What's happening in the Carolinas? A little bit too early to pinpoint that forecast, but it does look like on this current path that we're going to maybe get the southern tip of the Midwest to get in some of the rain here from Delta as we head into next week. So a little, again, too early to call that for sure, but I do think, at least on the current path, that we're going to see parts of the southern Ohio and Mississippi River Valley see more rain than initially anticipated. But at that point, it will be much, much less organized and just be fragments of what the tropical cyclone is now. So new tonight at 11 p.m., there's the new warnings that are issued for the U.S. You can see the hurricane warnings there pretty much from Morgan City over to Port Arthur. And then we've got tropical storm warnings for parts of Texas and back through the boot of Louisiana over to the state line of Mississippi. And I do expect to see these stay pretty much as is, unless there's a jog more towards the left of the scenarios that are in play. A closer jog towards Texas could be possible, so we could see some of these watches and warnings extended along the Texas coastline. But at this point, the Hurricane Center at this stage of the game has an excellent track record when we're talking about a landfalling hurricane less than 3 days out. So I don't anticipate a big variation in what you see here, but we could see some minor fluctuations in warnings and watches as we head into tomorrow. Okay, so here is the sea surface temperature map. I showed this yesterday, and we're gonna just randomly plot on some numbers here. We always talk about how warm it is in the Gulf of Mexico. Oh, look at that, it's not working. Oh, goodness, I didn't test this before. So I can tell you, because it's not plotting, but I can, oh gosh, I'm so bummed out. So I can tell you that this is where I've got a pointer is at 85 degrees Fahrenheit. It's just to the left of the hurricane icon, and I'm not, let me try something else. Wait 1 second. Let's try this. Nope, that's not going to do it either. Okay, well, we'll come back to this one. But anyway, the sea surface temperatures in the Gulf of Mexico are about 85 to 86 degrees Fahrenheit. So anything above 82 degrees is really the prime breeding grounds for these tropical cyclones. So when we're talking about temperatures 85 degrees Fahrenheit, you're already above that, and most of the Gulf of Mexico is averaging 84 or 85 degrees. And then as we get it closer to the Gulf Coast, or I'm sorry, towards Louisiana's coast, it goes to about 82 degrees. There's some little bit of a cooler shelf. The shelf here along Louisiana's coast is just a little bit cooler, so it's about 82. And even though that's right at that threshold, the Hurricane Center believes that's going to help keep this from getting any stronger. We've seen several hurricanes this season get stronger as they've approached the United States. The Hurricane Center's thinking is because of this shallow shelf where my arrow is, the lighter red you see there will likely inhibit it from getting stronger. So we should see this maintain a Category 2 status as it approaches Louisiana on Friday. And then we've also got some winds that are going to be coming out of the southwest, which will also disrupt the upper levels, the top part of the hurricane, as we get into Friday as well. Excuse me. Also new at 11 o'clock tonight are the storm surge warnings. You can see those that are in that bright pink. Storm surge watch is in the pale pink. I've got the storm surge warning on top because basically that's the more important one of the two at this point. And the newest info from the Hurricane Center bumps up that storm surge to about 4 to 11 feet. So most of Louisiana, let me get my pointer again. It's going to be a small area over Vermilion Bay that's going to have that 7 to 11 foot surge, but this area is going to be potentially, if it stays on the current track, would be 4 to 6 feet, maybe 3 to 5, depending on the exact track. Over in here, we're talking about that 7 to 11, possibly all the way over to Grand Isle, maybe 7 to 11. New Orleans, 2 to 4 foot surge, and then depending on, again, the ultimate final destination of where Delta comes in, we could see a storm surge go as far over to Mobile Bay. That's still a little bit early to say, but you can see the warnings that extend through southern Mississippi and then just start to encroach a little bit into Alabama, where we've got a storm surge watch. And that's where in the neighborhood of maybe 2 to 4 feet, depending on the ultimate track. And we'll know a lot more about that tomorrow night, and especially Friday, because the storm surge comes ahead of the landfalling hurricane and hangs around for hours and hours. So here's a graphic representation of that. The red, of course, indicates where we're looking at a surge as high as 9 feet, and then the orange is about 6 feet, the yellow about 3 feet, and then the blue coloring there you see about 1 foot. So that's based on the timing we have now, and fortunately for, of course, this area of Louisiana, much like we were talking about with Laura and with Sally, there's tons of marshland here. So while there are homes here, and there were homes that were devastated by Laura and by Sally, a lot of this is marshland, and it's not as highly populated as, say, of course, New Orleans is, or of course, further inland where it wouldn't be an issue with storm surge. But we do think that this storm surge is going to carry pretty far inland, because remember, I talked about this yesterday too, when Delta is in the central Gulf, it's going to be a more powerful hurricane than it will be at landfall. But it still takes all of that water that's in the Gulf and takes it with it. It's like a big shovel, if you will, or a big bulldozer that's capable of just displacing a huge amount of water and takes it with it as the hurricane moves north. So even though it's expected to be a weaker hurricane, the storm surge is still expected to be that would be comparable to a Category 3 hurricane. So I don't want folks to forget that. So if this comes in as a Category 2, remember the storm surge is forecast to come in as a Category 3 because it's going to be stronger tomorrow, and it's going to keep that water that's coming with it. That big bulldozer of water comes with it as it approaches the coast, and that's why we're concerned about the storm surge. Of everything that we're looking at today, at least tonight, we're really concerned with that storm surge being a big player, and of course that wind field where those Cat 2 winds will be coming in at. So here's a look at the Hurricane Hunter aircraft data. This is 2 flights that I checked in, and you can see this one, the wind speed was at 66 miles an hour. Remember, they're constantly flying in and out of these hurricanes, usually every few hours. So this particular run, there's two airplanes here. One of the wind speeds was at 73, the pressure 970 and 968 respectively, and they'll continue to do missions as we get into the day tomorrow. But it just kind of gives you a snapshot of what the Hurricane Center is looking at when they're formulating their intensity tracks. Do they knock the winds down a bit? Do they increase the winds? They look at all of the data that comes from the dropsondes, which are these tubes, these cylinders that they drop out of those airplanes inside. They fly inside the hurricanes. I know you guys know that. And then they drop these chutes of these with all these sensors that go down through the entire hurricane, taking readings all the way down to the ocean, down to the Gulf of Mexico, and it spits it back to the National Hurricane Center and puts it into a big supercomputer, if you will. And they use that as well as air soundings and elements in the upper levels of the atmosphere, all kinds of data that they look at to formulate their forecast. It's really fascinating stuff that they look at to try and come up with these paths. There's so much involved here. Okay, so here's a look at the Euro, and I showed this yesterday. I'm showing this one today again because it's very closely aligned with the National Hurricane's official path. You can see that again very near Lake Charles, and then moving up into the southeastern U.S. after that. Again, my biggest concern for this at this point is going to be that storm surge, which I do think is going to be Louisiana's problem, Mississippi's problem, and Alabama's problem potentially, and even maybe over into parts of the extreme western Florida panhandle, depending on the ultimate track. So I do think there's going to be a large area, not necessarily depicted in that path that we saw, that will get pieces of Delta that the Hurricane Center has been talking about. So if you live in this area and are in those evacuation zones, you really need to listen to the officials, because I know folks are saying, oh, it's only going to be a Category 2. That's not a big deal. But remember what I said at the top of this stream, 7 to 11 foot storm surge is a Category 3 storm surge equivalent. So that is the major player in this particular scenario right now. And we also have the wind factor, which the hurricane winds, by the way, extend out about 35 miles from the center. So it's about doubled in size since yesterday. And tropical storm force winds extend out about 140 miles from the center. So again, we talked about this hurricane growing larger in size, not necessarily in strength. And that means more people, more states, more counties under this umbrella of the wind and the rain and the surge. All right, so what can you expect from a Category 1 or a Category 2 hurricane? I've got the Category 2 level here because that's what's forecast. Winds between 96 and 110 will likely produce extensive damage in that immediate northeastern eye wall where folks will be dealing with the worst of the winds and power outages that could last up to a week. We've seen that all hurricane season. As we mentioned earlier in the week, this will be the 10th named storm to make a U.S. landfall. That breaks a record that was set back in 1916, and especially on the Gulf Coast where they're already so hurricane weary and their infrastructure is not even in place yet from the other hurricanes. Lake Charles's radar is still down from Sally. So, or from Laura, I'm sorry. So it's really incredible to see that this region of the country yet again has to deal with another hurricane. So the water vapor, one of our favorite resources that we like to show you guys when we're trying to talk about atmospheric conditions and what's playing out. So we talked about this trough of low pressure, kind of right about in here. Actually, it should be right about there. And then we've got a ridge of high pressure that's kind of over here in this, whoops, let me move that just a bit, right about in here. And then there's this this is not a player in the steering current, so I just wanted to point this out, this upper level low. Actually, I'm not going to even draw it. Let me just point it out to you. It's over just near the Bahamas, and it's right here. You can see that upper level swirl. Nothing at the surface, so it's not a tropical feature, but that the upper level low is hanging out. And then here is the trough. Let me try and draw that out, and I grabbed the wrong thing again, but it's kind of like that. And then here is the, if I can find, there we go, the rotation with the high. So remember, it's going this way, and then we've got the low pressure, the trough, with the winds going this way. So in the channel between those two is where Delta is going to head. And we do think that we're starting to see some interaction, or should start to see some interaction with that trough as soon as tomorrow. So over the last 1 to 2 days, Delta's been moving towards the west-northwest. We think it's going to start to turn more towards towards the northwest today. And then we should start to see more of a component towards the north-northwest. So starting to take that slight turn, and then more towards the north, and then eventually the northeast ahead of that trough. Because remember, hurricanes or tropical cyclones don't necessarily play well with other weather systems. So it's going to avoid that trough and move away from it towards the northeast, back towards the southeastern United States. So that we think is going to start to become more of a player tomorrow, and definitely on Friday, and then it's going to pick up its forward speed as well. So it may look like you have several days if you looked at this alone and said, hey, that thing's not coming for days. No, it's coming, in about 2 days or less. So it's going to pick up its forward speed, and that's why we want everybody to get those preps ready. Here's our high resolution HRR model, which is not going to show at landfall, but it'll get close, and you can see that it's showing right along the state line there of Louisiana and Texas. And again, you can see the incredible amount of wind and rain that's going to be affecting this area of the country. Now, this is Friday night around 10 o'clock, so actually it does show landfall. It didn't earlier, so I must have a run that's a little bit, let me get it right to where it looks like it would come in. And let me zoom back in here if it's going to let me. Nope, my computer won't let me do it. But anyway, so you can get the gist there. It's right at the state line between Louisiana and into Texas. So it's going to be very interesting to see where this plays out. That will ultimately determine the storm surges I mentioned, and also it will determine the level of those core winds that are around 90 miles an hour, but are forecast to be around 105 at landfall. So hopefully we won't see any winds higher than that, but that is certainly a possibility. And let me get this back to the infrared, and we'll load that back up. But I want, I always try and tell people when we've got these landfalling hurricanes that you've got to consistently check back in with the forecast, see what's going on. I've read a couple of comments lately where people have said, oh, the hurricane's doing this, or how did it get from a tropical storm to a Category 4 so quickly? And I talked about, again, the fluctuations in these smaller hurricanes are very easily manipulated, because these are smaller engines, if you will. This is, consider like a small compact car versus a big SUV. So it takes, or a big locomotive or something. So it takes a lot less energy for this system to be affected by outside conditions. So this hurricane has the ability to strengthen rapidly and weaken rapidly, and we've seen that for sure with Delta. And that's why I always say, when we talk about these smaller in size hurricanes, you've really got to stay up with the forecast, because things can change significantly pretty quickly. All right, so let me take a look at YouTube here real quick, and we'll see, and then I'll take a look at some other things. Matt, if you want to ask me some questions too, or that you read, we'll take a look. Okay, I don't see anything there. Orange County, Texas. Okay, I'm not, where is that? Is that on Twitter, or is that on Facebook? Oh, I missed it. Okay, I don't see it, but I'm not, I see it now, I'm sorry. Orange, no, yeah, I can't see the chat, but I know everybody else can. I see Orange County. I'll get back to that in a second. So someone below that just asked about Lake Charles. So Lake Charles, 100%, I think, is in that area of concern, because at this point, I think it's going to be very close to Lake Charles, possibly almost an identical path that we saw with Laura. It's too early to say that for sure. And again, don't like to compare hurricanes. This is not a Hurricane Laura. This isn't a Hurricane Sally. It's very different in structure and size. And but the comparison is the potential where the entry where it comes in at. Cameron, Louisiana potentially. But again, what's going to be different with this hurricane as opposed to those other very large Category 4 hurricanes that we dealt with is that this one is forecast to be a little bit weaker. But I think it could affect larger geography, because I think that storm surge is going to be much wider than a lot of people may have been anticipating. So I don't want people to, again, say, okay, this is a Category 2. I can handle a Category 2, because that storm surge is expected in Vermilion Bay and surrounding areas in coastal Louisiana to be 7 to 11 feet. And that is extremely dangerous, extremely life-threatening. Texas, eastern Texas, again, I can't rule you out at all, because I do think, we've seen those trends back towards Texas just ever so slightly. And just a bobble by about 50 miles would put the path right over Texas. So, you've got to continue to make the preps and stick to this forecast, keep up to date on the forecast, because I think it's, we're so close to potentially a Texas cyclone versus a Louisiana cyclone. It's just going to take a slight bobble in Delta to change to change the game, so to speak. So the Hurricane Center, does an excellent job. I'm sorry, my camera, there we go. Does an excellent job, forecasting these, and their margin of error within 24 hours is less than 50 miles. So, we think that this is going to be a Louisiana hurricane, but it's still going to impact parts of eastern Texas for sure, and parts of southern Mississippi and southern Alabama, and even maybe into the panhandle of Florida, depending on where it comes in at, and again, parts of Texas. So all of those factors still in play. Still want you to keep up to date. Tomorrow, again, I mentioned this early in the forecast. Tomorrow, I think, is the go day for that turn. Once we start to see that turn more towards the north-northeast, a subtle turn, north-northwest. Once we see that subtle turn more towards the north-northwest, then we know that the interplay is happening with that trough over Texas. And then we'll start to see the trending more towards the north. And then we're going to really start to be able to hone in, okay, this is where it's coming in at. But that's really not going to start to solidify until tomorrow, and really as late as tomorrow night. And then, of course, Friday morning, you already need to be hunkered down in place, ready to ride the storm out, because you won't be able to do anything, because the winds, once they get up to 35 or above, the rescue crews can't come out. They can't respond to 911 calls, and you're stuck where you are. So, tomorrow is your last full day and evening to make all of the preps before Friday is the go day with the landfall of Delta. All right, you guys, it is... Oh, hey, well, I know Sandy Rose on YouTube loves Matt, so Matt's there tonight. Sandy, by the way, you guys, I'll give her a huge shout out. When we started this YouTube channel, she was one of our first followers on the YouTube channel, and is consistently watches our live broadcast. She supports all of our efforts, and we really appreciate you guys that consistently come back and watch our videos and support us. So thank you, Sandy, for staying up. She's in the southeastern part of the U.S. I won't give out exactly where she is, but we appreciate Sandy. All right, you guys. That'll do it, I think. It is 11:59, 1 minute shy of midnight here in the East Coast. We are in Orlando, Florida. Tomorrow, more of the same, more live updates for you throughout the day. We'll have tropical updates. Matt and I will be back with you tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. Probably going to do a quick update for you then. And then we'll pick up our coverage with Mike Linden tomorrow afternoon. I think it's tomorrow afternoon. I think he's, 2 p.m. He'll be with you. And with Stephanie Larbro will be joining. All three of us will be on deck on Friday. And we'll have our editors as well. Our directors will be, so we'll be full staff for you guys for landfall. And of course, Stephanie and Damien will be around for the weekend coverage to keep you guys up to date. Okay, that'll do it, you guys. Happy Thursday morning. It's now officially midnight, and I hope you get some rest, folks in the Southeast, and especially along the Gulf Coast. I hope you're making those preps. Stay safe. Have a great night. We'll see you tomorrow.